Hello friends, Mark Johnson here. Welcome back to another episode of the TRIRIGA War Room where experts advise. Hello friends, today's episode is going to be about lists. We're going to create a list for our sport and it's just going to be a very simple list. It's only going to have a couple values in it. It's just a list to determine whether the sport is an individual sport or a team sport. So to do that, we need to talk about lists and how to create lists and what the different properties and options are when it comes to lists, the types that there are. So let's go ahead and get ourselves logged in. This again is 11.1.4.1 and would be the same pretty much through any version of TRIRIGA. We have to go to the tools and then we're going to come over here to the list. This is our list manager. So lists are not BO dependent, they're module dependent. So if you know the name of the module your list resides in, then it'll be easier to search for that list. Otherwise, some of the lists will, be here, and you can sort by either the name or the type. So you've got to drop down here, right, and how you want to search for it. And there's, quite a few lists in the system, and it doesn't list them all. And some of the most common lists that you're going to modify are the association types. So whenever you're creating a new string for an association so that you can relate your objects together, you're going to have to go in and modify that. And we'll discuss the different types of lists and their properties here in just a moment. But we want to create our list, and we want to create it inside our sports module, because again, lists are module dependent. So if you happen to look over here, right, you see, wait a minute, I don't see the CST sports module. Well, because there are no lists currently in that module. So the way we're going to create a list in our module is we're just going to click on the new list, right? It doesn't matter what the module that we have selected or looking at. Creating a new list gives us opportunity to create the list wherever we want. So the first field is the name. What is the name of the list? So by convention, this is a custom list. So we're going to prefix it with CST. All your development should be prefixed with your custom prefix. Generally it is CST, but there are some cases where companies used prefixes of their own in order to demonstrate that it was custom, and that kind of reflects the changing standards of naming convention over the years. So when I first started in TRIRIGA back in 2009, the CST had really just started coming forth as the standard, and before that they had urged companies to just pick a prefix of their own. So you might end up, if you had XYZ company, well, they might use a prefix of XYZ. So in this case we're going to do CST, and we're going to call it, we'll call it sports type. And then the label here is going to be sports type. You have the description field here, and you can put in a nice long description, and then you'll never see it again. This is the only place you see the description. There's no place that reports on it or shows it, so it's not really that helpful. So I generally just leave it blank because of this. But if it makes you feel better, you can put a little description in here. The sport it is. All right. The next thing is type. So if you go back here and you look, right, we have the ability to sort by type as well as the name of the list. So everything that comes shipped with the system is labeled system, and you can see there is some mix of all caps versus not. And the standard has been to put custom. Well, because you can sort on this type, you can actually group these lists. If you have related lists, you could give them the same kind of type. Matter of fact, the app builder guide mentions, like, if you had a bunch of lists for like training, that you could label them as training, and so then if you were to sort based off the type, if you didn't necessarily know the name, then you could go and see what all the different training types are. So just pick something that makes sense or is different from the out of the box that you can sort on. I'm just going to go with custom because this is kind of what I was taught 14 years ago or so. The language. the language is going to be the language that the list is in. This really only comes into play if you're using internationalization, language translations, and that sort of thing. But it should be the language of the system, right? So that whatever when TRIRIGA was installed, whatever that base or that default language, this language should match that language, and then other languages would be translations. All right. System list. All right. You do not want to check system list because what this means is that this list you won't be able to delete it. So not that deleting lists happens, but if you make a mistake and you made it as a system list, then you won't be able to delete it. And so you just have to live with that mistake, create a new list with a different type of name, because the UI isn't going to give you a mechanism to delete it. Now, yes, for those of you that are more advanced, sure, you could go into the database and you could delete the entries from the list manager and the list values. So there are a few different tables that contain the list stuff. So it is possible to delete something, but it's never a good idea to go and directly delete stuff in the database. All right. So again, lists are module dependent. They're not BO dependent. So they're going to be the least dependent object in the system outside of modules. So we want to select our module, which is CST Sports. So you can see it does show up here. So the next value here is dependent list. What a dependent list is it's a list that the values of that list depends on the value that is selected in another list. So one of the classic examples that is used in some of the TRIRIGA training is like cars. You have make and model. So you could have a list of makes. So you'd have things like, Chevy and Dodge, Hyundai, Toyota, that sort of thing. And then model, right? So for instance, for Ford, you might have, Mustang and Taurus. And for, Dodge, maybe you've got, Charger, Ram 1500. For Chevy, maybe you've got, Corvette, Cruise, whatever other, vehicles. So the value of the model is dependent on the make, right? You wouldn't say that it is a Chevy Mustang because Chevy doesn't make Mustangs, Ford does, right? So if you want to stick with the sports analogy, right, you could have a list of sports and then the teams that play in that particular sport. So to create a dependent list, you create the parent list first, and then once you've created that parent list, you would come back and create your dependent list. And so that you would indicate that, hey, I am a dependent, and then that would give you the ability to go and select the source or the parent list by its module and then the list type. In this case, this isn't going to be a dependent list. We're not going to select that. The final value here is source type. And the default value is manual. It means that the list is manually maintained. I'm going to manually either add values to it or remove values from it. The other option is dynamic. Now, a dynamic list gets its values from records in the system. So if you're building a dynamic list, you would go and you would select the object, right? And in that object, let's say I was making a dynamic list of statuses, and we've got TriStatus here. So TriStatus, and you can see I can select the the name, the color, description. So if I selected name, then all the TriStatus records, their name values would make up a list, and it would be sorted in alphabetical order, and it also would not have duplicates. Now, that can be very useful for you depending on the scenario. There was a time that I had to create a search field that the customer wanted to know or you wanted to be able to search based on off of the project manager, right? So we had a search screen, and on that search screen, if I had just used like a, a classification or a locator field type of thing, I would get one entry for that project manager for every record in the system, right? So they would have hundreds, if not thousands, of entries to go through potentially to find the one that they wanted. So instead, what I did is I created a dynamic list that pointed to the project manager, the names there. And so that built up my list, and again, it wasn't duplicated, right? Because in TRIRIGA queries, you don't have the ability to select distinct values, right? Like you can with SQL. So in this case, very simple list, just manual. It's our sports type. I'm going to click OK. Now we have here value, save entries, delete entries. So this is where we're going to manually start entering in the values of our list. Well, my list is going to be very short, but we're not going to judge it by its size, just like you shouldn't judge Yoda by his size. And the first value is going to be individual. And then the second is team. And I'm going to click on Save Entries. Now, to this point, these values have not been added to the list. So I can build out my list up here first, and then once I hit Save Entries, they're going to come down here. Now, it does put them in alphabetical order for us initially, but you will find lots of times that not every list is sorted. And so one of the most common ones is the association types. So we'll come over here to System, and let's look at association types. So you can see the association types, it looks like they happen to be sorted in alphabetical order. It's very common for this list to get out of order because people are adding new associations and stuff to it. So what you have to do is you'd come over here and you'd hit Sort List, and that can take just a minute to sort the list, and then once the list was in alphabetical order, then you would need to hit Save Sequence in order to save that sequence or save it in order, because as you can see here, right, in the list managers, you have the ability to move a value up or down, right? And you also have the ability here, right, to delete values. So you can come in and you can select values and you can delete those entries, right? We also have delete lists. So going back to the properties, right, you can't delete a system list. So if this is a system list, you wouldn't be able to delete it. One thing about deleting entries, lists, when you're migrating them from one environment to another via an OM package, lists merge. So in your environment, you may say, hey, I don't need these particular associations anymore. I'm going to delete them. And you can delete them. And then you build your OM package and you go and you move it to the next environment, and then the list fields are still there. They're not deleted. And that's because lists merge. So that's something to be aware of as you create lists, right? You don't want to just be going crazy adding in values that you're going to have to turn around and delete, because deletion is a very manual process. It has to be done from the list manager here in the UI in each environment. So this pretty much sums up the list manager and how to create a list. So things you can do again, you can sort the list, you can save the sequence that it's in, you can create a new list. You can click the view and edit the list, so you can see the property. See, here's where you can see the description, right? So this is why it's not really said often. And then here you can see, okay, this is a system list. So you would not have the ability to delete this particular list. So, okay, now that our list has been created, we need to go ahead and go add it onto our object, which is our classification that we created. So we need to go back to the data modeler. I'm going to go to Tools, select the data modeler, and if you recall, we created a classification called CST Sport. It's in the classification module. So we're not putting this on the CST Sports, our base BO, because this list field is going on our classification for sport to classify the sport type. So it's information about the sport and not really appropriate or proper for our base BO. It may end up on some of the other fields or other business objects rather in that module as we go to create them, I haven't fully planned out yet all of that and how that's going to work out. But for now, we need to go ahead and revise our business object. We are going to click on Add to add a field. And then the field type is a list field. And then we need to give it a name. So the name, we will just call it CST Sport Type LI. So again, remember your naming conventions for fields. List fields have a suffix of LI, and because this is a custom field, we're prefixing it with CST. So our fields again have a prefix as well as a suffix. We want to stick with that naming convention. If for some reason you leave off the suffix, happens quite a bit, or you leave off the prefix, heck, maybe you leave them both off, right? Whenever you notice it, go ahead and then go and fix it. Sometimes you might have gotten a little bit farther in the development and it might take a little effort to delete, because if something's in use you can't remove it. So, but don't just leave bad development out there because it's hard to get rid of, right? Always go for your best and do the best, right? Because it helps remove confusion. It makes it easier in the long run for yourself as well as for others. All right, our label, auto-populated, but we want it to be nice and friendly, so we'll say sport type. I don't need a description or purpose. We're not going to make this required. We are going to select the do not auto-populate because we always, and I mean always, select do not auto-populate unless you are 100% sure you want that field to populate. Don't forget this. And we need to select our module, which is CST Sports. Now, even though this is our classification business object, I didn't create the list field in classification. I created it in the sports module just because we're doing all of our custom development in that, for the most part in that module. There are some, it's good to keep things, grouped together. All right. We do have a choice for a default value. We can say we can pick one of the values in our list, or we can leave it blank. If you pick a default value, don't make it a required list. That defeats the whole purpose, right? If you don't set a default value and you say it's required, then that means that, hey, the user needs to select one of the values in order to proceed. If you then default it to the most common value, what's going to happen is more often than not the user isn't going to bother with it because the field is already set, and they're going to click and go on and move forward, and then realize that, oh, I picked the wrong value, right? So if you're going to leave it blank and you want to have it required, okay. If you're not going to leave it blank, don't make it required. And nothing else that we need to set. It's not going to be read-only. We want the user to be able to pick a value. It's not going to be audited or staging table field. So we'll go ahead and click Save. You can see our custom field is now here. And we can publish our business object. Now, our field is on our business object. We need to add it to the form so that it can be selected. So we need to go to the Form Builder tool. We do that by going to Tools, Form Builder, and in classification it's CST Sport. I'm going to revise this. All right, let's put this on the General tab. Or you know what? We'll put it in Details. Because right now it's just got the tricolor field. So we need to see the components. I'm going to select components. Now here's my list field. Because again, we published the BO, so now it's available to be selected. So I'm going to add it, and it shows up right here. And that's good. I'm not really going to use the display color most likely, but we're going to leave it be just in case. Now let's go ahead and publish our form. All right, so now that field is in the system and it should be available for use, right? It's on the business object, it's on the form. So let's go validate it. We'll close our form. We're going to go back to Tools because we need to go to the Classification Manager. So we'll go to Classifications. And again, the classification hierarchy is rather large, so it does take a little bit to load, right? The beefier your system is, the faster it loads, so don't be surprised, you know, if it takes 30, 45 seconds, whatever, for this to load. I'm going to scroll down, let's go find sport. There it is, sport. So I'm going to select the root so that then the filtering, right, the query is going to show the children records, right? If I was to select on, say, baseball, well, baseball has no children records. This query would be empty, and then to open up baseball, I would then have to come and click open here, right? Otherwise, I can just click it in here. So you can see baseball is a team sport. So let's go ahead and set that to team, and I will save and close. And I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing here. Bowling is an individual sport, first and foremost, although you can do team things. Football is a team sport. Golf, again, individual sport, although you can do teams, it's still based off of the individual scores. Soccer is a team. And last but not least, tennis, again, it's primarily individual, although you can do doubles, right? There are team stuff related, but it still kind of depends on the individuals. This one's kind of quasi, right? It could be either. So maybe I'd have to come up with another list value, right? You know, say both, or maybe we'll just, you know, select depending on what it's going to be used for, if it's individual or not. But so at this point, we have now added it, right? We verified our field. We saw that we could select each of the different values, and we're good. So we've created our list. We made it a manual list. We added the entries to our list. We've gone over all the properties of lists, how to create lists, and then we've added that list to a list field, and then we've put that field on our business object and our form so that it can be used by the user. So that concludes lists. So again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. All right, friends, that wraps up another episode of the TRIRIGA War Room. Thank you for watching this episode. If you like these videos and you find them helpful, you know, please do like and subscribe to the channel. You know, your subscriptions are the only way that I have to know if you find these videos helpful and if I should continue to make them or not. I do these videos on my own time. I'm not currently compensated in any way for them. So if they're not helpful, I'd much rather go and work on some of my other side projects. So here at the TRIRIGA War Room, we really do want to be your expert advisors and to help you to better implement and use TRIRIGA. So if you have any ideas for future videos, or even if you would like to, you know, guest instruct a future video, please do let me know. Again, thanks for watching. We look forward to seeing you next time.